innovation begins with recognition of a problem. And that comes from compassion and empathy. Whether you're a physician or an architect, scientist, you have to understand the end user, the patient, the client. Getting to know people and their problems is where innovation, I think, really begins.
Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the UC San Diego Career Podcast, Designing Your Career and Life, hosted by the Career Center in partnership with Alumni Engagement. My name is Hassan Akmal. I'm the Executive Director of Career and Professional Development at the University of California, San Diego. I'm the host of the UC San Diego Career Podcast, featuring diverse professionals and discussing provocative career-related topics that inspire, transform, and empower you on a path to meaningful work. The topic of today's podcast is Careers in Medicine. This is episode 9 in season 3. This season's theme is focused on mastering your career profile. Each season, we align a different theme to help you design your path forward in a time of disruption and uncertainty. I'm here with our guest, Dr. Murray A. Riker, an alumnus of UC San Diego, and my co-host for today, Ron Reyes, Associate Director of Health Professions at the University of California, San Diego's Career Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad
Great
to be here.
A little about our first guest. Dr. Riker, a board-certified diagnostic radiologist and fellow of the American College of Radiology, is an experienced healthcare executive, serial healthcare entrepreneur, angel investor, and inventor with 150 and issued patents. During his undergraduate career, he worked with Nobel-winning UCLA biochemist Paul Boyer as a National Science Foundation grant winner at age 18. He then completed his MD at UC San Diego School of Medicine and was the recipient of the Regent Scholar B'nai B'rith Scholar, and he completed his final thesis on functional anatomy of the hand and distal forearm. He currently serves as a clinical instructor at the UC San Diego School of Medicine, mentor at UC San Diego's HealthLink student organization. He is also known for his seminal work in early development of clinical application for MRI, including the first MRI of the knee, first books on MRI of the knee and wrist, first publication and development of multi-angle MRI. He also pioneered work in computerized medical image management, including founding one of the first companies in the field, DR Systems, installing the first filmless imaging center in the world and the first filmless private US hospital. We are honored to have you here, Dr. Reicher. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. Ron, tell us a little bit about how you serve as the primary connector and about your role at the UC San Diego Career Center. And tell us a little bit about what is HealthBeat for those listeners that are unaware.
Absolutely. So I, alongside my colleague, Jade Pearson, are the HealthBeat advisors. So for UC San Diego's Career Center, what that means is we do all the health professions, advisement, programming, and planning with our students, from doing one-on-one appointments to workshops, working alongside different student organizations and campus affiliates to make sure that we try and do our very best to help them strategize and think about how they can get into health professions and apply into professional school.
Fantastic. So there are so many issues facing healthcare right now in the United States and abroad. This question is for Dr. Riker. How has the pandemic impacted the path to medicine?
Well, in some ways, it's made it more difficult because part of going into medicine is validating that you, in fact, want healthcare as a career. You want to be a doctor or other healthcare professional. And to do that, you have to find volunteer positions and paid positions. You need to shadow doctors. And for good health reasons, it's just been much more difficult to find those types of volunteer positions the last 2 or 3 years. But I also say, every challenge is an opportunity. So it's provided some opportunities for people really innovate and find creative ways to find opportunities to view healthcare, and in some ways, therefore, to distinguish yourselves from others in a very competitive situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And given your experience as both a lecturer at UC San Diego and working with UCSD's HealthLink students, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you've had as an educator when it comes to navigating the pandemic and working with our medical students? And what would you say are some of those challenges in the future?
Okay, well, the challenges during the pandemic, of course, was just engaging people. Lives were disrupted. Everyone was masked, really indoors at UCSD. Everyone pretty much still is masked. It's harder to really get to know people. 3 years ago when we had a Health League meeting, we served pizza and everybody showed up. Getting busy schedules and getting people to make friends, things like that on Zoom. It's just much more difficult. Now, future, I think still the challenge is always engaging people, inspiring them. If you're a leader of any type, befriending them, understanding their needs, listening to them. Those are always the challenges in education.
Yeah, I remember my days as a pre-med student, and fortunately, I was one of them that got into medical school, ended up kind of pursuing a career in global health passionately. But, getting into medical school isn't easy, especially for those that are trying to balance the co-curricular. I was a scholar athlete, for example, and there's just so many challenges that you have to overcome, let alone, your first experience, maybe if you're first gen and, in a college environment at a rapid pace. The quarter system is definitely not slow. So what are some helpful ways students can navigate such a cumbersome and sometimes overwhelming process?
Well, okay. So the first thing I would say is if you're an entering freshman and you're thinking that you're going to have a career in healthcare, imagine yourself in professional school from the day you get started. At the end of your journey as an undergraduate, when you're ready to apply to a healthcare professional school, someone is going to want to know why. And they're going to want to know who you are, what sparked your interest in medicine, but just as importantly, what validated your interest. You're a serious applicant, you've done your homework, and that doesn't begin 3 months before you have to apply. You have to develop experiences that truly help you validate the direction that you want to go in. And this is not just resume building, it's your life. This is for you. You might find that, certain performance in your first year of medical school, in your first year as an undergraduate, doesn't, guarantee that you're going to get into medical school, but you can do things during your first or second year that pretty much guarantee that you won't. I just think you have to think that you're already in medical school from the day you start as an undergraduate or dental school or nursing school or whatever the school is. And now it's your job to stay in. You can get yourself kicked out by, performing poorly in your first few years. Now, I will say the other side of this story. There's students that have difficulty adjusting to college. They have personal circumstances that derail them for a year or two in their lives. And that doesn't mean that you're permanently derailed. There's plenty of ways to kind of resurrect your career ambitions if you have been derailed a bit. The best advice is to get on track early and stay on track.
So I actually have a question then. So thinking about a student going on and really pursuing medicine, but potentially along the way they realize that might not necessarily be the only path for them. I find that I work with a lot of students where they go through that exploration process. So what I want to know from your side of things and seeing a lot of these students is, for those open to opportunities within healthcare, what would you recommend students look into as potentially either new or emergent areas that have unmet needs, or that might be something that not many students might originally have on their radar?
Well, first off, I mean, it's healthcare. It's a very broad. There's so many things that are healthcare, right? You can be a nutritionist and be in healthcare. You could be a hospital administrator and be in healthcare. Public health. I'd like to see some more members of the U.S. Senate and Congress, maybe even a president someday, that's a physician, or some other healthcare provider. We have a huge need for great people in public health right now. So looking forward, our country has tremendously underfunded public health. The pandemic certainly exposed that. We have terrible problems in the US with health literacy, with health disparities. Whenever there's a problem, it creates an opportunity. So if you're planning for the future, look at the problems and you'll see where the opportunities arise. It's a very diverse field. When I interviewed for medical school, my last interview was at UCSD. And, up until that time, I'd had 8 or 9 interviews, I think. And I was pretty good at answering the question, why do you want to be a doctor? It wasn't a surprise when somebody asked me that, right? There were no MMI interviews in those days. That's what everyone led with. At UCSD, I started into my pretty much canned speech as to why I want to be a doctor. And 2 sentences into it, I said, you know what? This is my last interview. Here's actually the story. I'm 21 years old. I'm a really good student. I had been a very good tennis player, but not good enough to make a living. And very few people in the world in those days did make a living playing tennis. But I said, look, here's the real truth. I need to stay in school for another 4 years. And while I don't know exactly what I want to do at age 21, I have a feeling I'll have a better idea by the time I'm 25. And if I start off in healthcare, in this case, as an MD, I'm pretty much convinced that I could do anything. And that's true with a lot of healthcare careers. There's great flexibility. And if you're an MD, you could go into public health. You could become a surgeon or a pediatrician. You could have a traditional career. You could go work for pharma and develop drugs if you want to, manage research protocols. So you don't always have to have a specific idea of what you want to do. But if you're committed to helping people with their health, you start off with a broad education, expose yourself to all the things that you might be interested in, and don't narrow down until you have to.
I love that. And I'm a tennis player too. I think I told you that when we first met. That's such a great story. And tennis tennis definitely gives you some good skills. And at one point in my career, I had to make a decision. It was tennis or medicine. So I cut a deal with my parents and I said, if I get into medical school, I'm going to defer for a year and play tennis professionally. And then I kept playing professionally, which took me into a whole different direction. But thank you for sharing that. I love that. So technology is changing the world. Yet when we look at how we rank among some of the developed nations in terms of health status, we're not even in the top 50. Where are we going wrong? And what do students need to focus on to help make it right?
The first thing I would say is, as a nation, we've neglected health literacy. Most of the students that are listening, any adult that's listening, not to say that students aren't adults, they are, but your health education was a summer school, probably online health class when you were 14. And that's where we teach students not to do drugs or have sex, and like that doesn't work, right? We don't teach them about nutrition. We don't teach them about the health insurance issues. We don't teach about the core issues of preventive health. You know, there are studies that show that more than half of all cancers are preventable. Studies that show that if you eat a balanced diet, low in red meat, you maintain a body mass index under 30, you exercise regularly, and you don't smoke. Just 4 things that are free, that we would eliminate about 75% of all chronic disease in the United States. 4 things that are free. Where was that discussed in the debate between masking and, right? We know that the majority of people who had COVID complications had comorbidities. So I think where we've gone wrong is preventive health. If we're going to move the needle at all, and remember, it's not all about finance. It's not just about affording healthcare. It's about helping people live healthier, more productive lives. And so I think preventive health is a huge area, underfunded. We need health literacy in this country more than I think anything else if we're going to move the needle on health.
Well said.
And, speaking of moving the needle, I feel with not only the wealth of knowledge you have, but your knack for innovating, what would you say are some of the things that helped you think about innovation within healthcare, and how does one approach that thought process? And working with students, what would you say are some of the areas that they could also consider how to innovate and educate others so that we can move the needle forward?
Well, for me, when innovation begins with recognition of a problem. And that comes from compassion and empathy. Whether you're a physician or an architect, scientist, you have to understand the end user, the patient, the client. Getting to know people and their problems is where innovation, I think, really begins. The next thing I'd say is you have to withhold judgment until you've really analyzed a problem. And I like, when I'm faced with a problem, even if it's a math problem, or a social problem, or an ethical dilemma, or a technical issue, I like to think of myself in a helicopter, kind of flying around the problem from every direction. So when, there's a crowd of people standing in front of a burning building, there's one person that thinks, what would it be like to be in that building? Maybe I'd be trying to get out the back door, and they run around to the back of the building to see where they can provide help. And that's really the root of innovation. For particularly pre-health students, at some point, you're going to be in an interview and competing for a position. Whether it's for that reason or just, as a benefit to your overall life, you need to develop a system for solving problems. When people interview you, they may ask you about an ethical dilemma or, the typical MMI type question. There's really only one question. How do you solve problems? How do you think? So while you're developing the knowledge that you get from your coursework and your experiences, try to develop a system of evaluating problems that you can go back to. That's the number one thing I think we teach pre-med students when they're preparing for medical school. And by the way, it's the number one thing I try to teach students in medical school, residents, engineers, scientists, all the people I collaborate with is let's agree on a systematic method of evaluating problems. I think that's tremendously beneficial in life.
So powerful, right? The identification of a problem sort of as the root of innovation. I love how you position that. So what about access to healthcare? So many people don't have access. How can we ensure that this changes in the future? First,
everyone has let me just say the best aspects of preventive health are all free. So finance is not the barrier. It's knowledge, education. So maybe I should retract a little bit of what I said. Everyone doesn't have equal access to that knowledge and education, but it is free to take care of yourself, to maintain a body mass index under 30, to exercise, at least walk 100 minutes a week, to not smoke. These are things we know we have to do. So that's a form of access. The next thing is the classic discussion of whether healthcare is a right or something that you buy, and I think it's a false question. In our country and in most of the world, healthcare actually is a right, and the reason I say that is, and anybody who thinks it isn't should just walk into any ER in the U.S. The ERs are filled with people who are exercising their right to healthcare. You walk in, you're going to get service. So the question isn't, is healthcare a right or not? It's how much healthcare is a right, and what's the quality of healthcare that you're entitled to. And that's obviously it's a core issue of public debate. We'd live in a better world, I think, personally, if we provided broader access to healthcare for everybody, because it's economically so much more expensive to treat problems once they've gotten out of hand. And when you have people who don't have access to at least basic preventive healthcare, which goes beyond those habits to immunizations, periodic diagnostic preventive evaluation, and other things. When you don't have that and you're fixing problems at the end, like chronic congestive heart failure, diabetes, the hypertension, complications of smoking, the things that cost us most of the money. When you are solving problems instead of preventing them, it's just way more expensive.
I love that. So powerful. And I love the reframe, especially building off of Ron's fantastic question on innovation and kind of tying those together to the problem solving. I want to ask you both for a lightning round. I know our listeners want it. So real quickly, if we can do one more lightning round, if you could both chime in this time, what's one call to action that you recommend for anyone interested in a career in medicine?
If you're interested, close your eyes and imagine yourself already in that career, and take every day seriously. Your 20s are not a time to sit idle and find yourself. You got to look for yourself and look within yourself and really start performing. Whether you're talking about Albert Einstein or Mark Zuckerberg or Mozart or many of the world's most accomplished people, Madame Curie, they were all over the hill by the time they were 30. So don't waste your 20s.
That's great. Now, right on that coattail and say that somebody who is in their 20s, it would have been a lot more helpful back then, when my 20s, to be a lot more curious about things. Yeah. Really take the time to say, if this is something I'm really interested in, let's dig in. Let's ask the hard questions. Let's say, what does this look like? And find people to ask those hard questions and really evaluate what I'm doing, right? I think a lot of people in their 20s don't necessarily see that. And now that I'm in my 30s, I can definitely see that, especially working with students. So I feel having a sense of curiosity and willingness to ask the hard questions and dig into it and really get to understand what's out there, I think is incredibly important, especially if you're going to get into healthcare and medicine. There's so many questions out there that you can seek out, ask about, think about, and really put into context what you could be doing.
I think my mentors who were physicians at the time would ask me questions like, what's the greatest challenge facing medicine? And they would ask me about my why, which Dr. Riker kind of talked about how it tied into his why and answering that question and how that leads into your story. And then, the greatest challenge back then, I remember them saying, managed care. And then, years later, it was organized care. And now we're in a whole different world. I want to thank both of you for your insights, for your time. You both are incredible resources for us. Do you have any final thoughts, tips, or anything you want to share to our listeners?
Well, I mean, there's an old saying, aim high, dare to fail. And I would just following up on what Ron said, just be curious, immerse yourselves in all experiences that you can find. Something will spark your passion, and follow that spark.
Love that. Ron,
really hard to follow up that. I would say, there's a lot out there, and it's okay to ask for help. I feel a lot of people feel obligated to seem like they already know everything or that they already have everything planned out. And that's just not how life works. We're all still trying to continue to develop and change. And as long as we're okay with that, that's, I think, where we can make a lot of the best kind of progress and understanding to everything. Is just know that we don't have to be an expert to really work on things. And that's actually how we should be.
Love those. And I'm going to throw one in, kind of building off of Dr. Riker's suggestion kind of early on, is the whole visualization of you already being in medical school in your first year. I think that is a game changer. And we talk a lot about career and life vision, and that's difficult to build that vision and that clarity. And so if you start with that and you refine it, and, to your point, don't get kicked out, right? Take advantage of all your resources and the mentors and both of you as resources. I know some of our listeners are wondering, wow, if we could only just keep going with this podcast. So if they have questions, Dr. Riker, thank you for your time, expertise, wisdom, for sharing. How can listeners get in touch with you?
I'm easy to reach. You can ask for me through the health guidance office, the pre-med office, or the medical school. I probably won't put out my email and cell phone number on a podcast, but I'm very easy to reach. And always happy to help students that reach out to me.
Yes, and students can reach out to us, and we can also pass the information over and connect. And Ron, you're a rock star. I hear the feedback from students. Thank you for helping facilitate today's session. How can listeners get in touch with you?
Well, for all my UCSD students, I'm going to say this right now. HealthBeat inbox is there for you. You can schedule an appointment with me for additional assistance. For those outside of UCSD, I'd be more than happy to chat over LinkedIn. Just search Ron Reyes and the Career Center, and you'll find me. But I'm here to help, and I'm super happy to have this opportunity to talk with Dr. Riker and you about something that is very near and dear to me, which is helping students in the health professions.
That's right. Thank you again to both of you. I leave you all with this message. Every single one of you has a purpose. It's developed from your passion. And when one is on point with that purpose, it can help change the world for the better. What's your motivation? Thank you.